The philosophical weight of a psychological insight. Carl Jung's famous quote, "Life really begins at 40. Up until then you are just doing research," may initially appear to be a light-hearted remark on aging. However, when interpreted through the lens of Jungian psychology and philosophy, the statement opens the door to profound existential insights. What does it mean for life to begin? Why does it not start at birth or adulthood? For Jung, the essence of a meaningful life is not found in youth's hustle or external success, but rather in the inward journey of psychological maturation, a process that often starts only after one has lived long enough to experience disillusionment with societal roles and superficial identities. This essay aims to examine Jung's assertion from multiple philosophical standpoints, his own depth psychology, existentialism through the works of Kierkegaard, Heidegger and Sartre, classical ethics, especially Aristotle's concept of telos, and Eastern philosophies such as Hinduism and Buddhism. Through this cross-disciplinary lens, we will see how Jung's statement is not merely motivational, but a deeply ontological claim about the structure of human existence. By age 40, most people have fulfilled, or at least attempted, the socially constructed goals of life, education, career, marriage, perhaps parenthood. But despite these achievements, many report a deep sense of emptiness or restlessness. Jung viewed this not as failure, but as a necessary phase of awakening. Life, in his view, begins when one turns inward, questioning the persona crafted for survival in the first half of life and embarking on the journey toward individuation, a process that calls the self into deeper alignment with its inner truth. Jungian individuation. Life's second half is spiritual calling. At the heart of Jung's psychological theory is the concept of individuation, a lifelong process of integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of the psyche. The first half of life, according to Jung, is dominated by ego development. We build a persona, or social mask, shaped by cultural expectations, family norms, and peer influence. We are taught to seek stability through education, employment, marriage, and reputation. In this phase, the self is defined by external structures. However, Jung noticed that around midlife, often between the ages of 35 and 45, many individuals experience a psychological shift. The goals that once brought satisfaction no longer suffice. One may have financial security and social status, yet feel a sense of hollowness. This is the moment Jung referred to as the midlife transition, a potential crisis, but also a profound opportunity. As he wrote in The Stages of Life, we cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. The psyche demands growth beyond the ego. Repressed desires, unresolved childhood wounds, and archetypal energies emerge from the unconscious. Symbols, dreams, and even anxiety become tools of transformation. Individuation begins when the individual starts to reconcile the persona with the shadow, the unconscious aspects of the self, eventually integrating other elements such as the anima animus, the internal masculine feminine, and the self, the archetype of wholeness. Thus, Jung's quote suggests that prior to 40, life is research, a time of testing roles and forming the ego. But at 40, one begins the authentic work of becoming whole. It is not a rejection of earlier life, but a culmination, a spiritual maturation where life truly begins, not outwardly, but inwardly. Existentialism and the midlife confrontation with meaning. Jung's insight into the midlife transition is echoed in the existential philosophies of Kierkegaard, Heidegger, and Sartre. Soren Kierkegaard, in Either Or, presents two modes of living, the aesthetic and the ethical. The aesthetic life, concerned with pleasure, success, and social conformity, often characterizes early adulthood. It is a life of avoidance, of commitment, depth, and authentic selfhood. Eventually, the aesthetic person faces despair, a condition Kierkegaard saw as the soul's way of calling the self to responsibility. This transition from aesthetic to ethical life mirrors Jung's individuation, the emergence of meaning through conscious choice. Martin Heidegger's philosophy further deepens this view. In Being and Time, Heidegger argues that humans live in inauthenticity when they absorb the they-self, the norms and opinions of society without question. True existence. Authenticity arises when we confront the reality of our mortality through angst. Midlife is often when this confrontation occurs. The realization that time is finite, that dreams deferred may never manifest, and that death is not a vague abstraction, but a personal inevitability. For Sartre, existence precedes essence. We are not born with fixed identities, but must create ourselves through choice. Yet in youth, we often choose based on external validation. Midlife, however, presents a chance to break free from bad faith, self-deception, and choose with greater integrity. In all these thinkers, midlife is not an ending, but a beginning. It is when illusion crumbles, authenticity becomes possible, and the individual can finally confront their freedom. As Jung suggests, only after 40 do we truly begin to live. Not as societal constructs, but as authentic selves. Aristotle and the fulfillment of human purpose. While existentialists focus on freedom and authenticity, Aristotle offers a complementary perspective rooted in purpose. In Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle defines eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing or happiness, as the highest human good. This flourishing is achieved not through pleasure or wealth, but through the cultivation of virtue over time. Humans, he argued, have a telos, an end or purpose, to live rationally and ethically, developing excellence of character arete. Youth, in Aristotle's view, is a time of instruction and experimentation. People in their 20s and 30s are often guided more by impulse and ambition than by wisdom. It is only in middle age that one gains the stability, life experience, and moral clarity necessary for mature ethical reasoning. This aligns with Jung's notion that real life, defined by psychological depth and alignment with one's inner truth, begins at 40. For Aristotle, a fully realized life requires time, patience, and effort. Maturity allows for reflection, for the balancing of appetites and reason, and for acting not merely for gain but for the good of the soul. Thus, Jung's psychological timeline finds philosophical reinforcement in Aristotelian ethics. The transition to midlife becomes the entry point into the fulfillment of one's true nature, not a time of decline but of telos realized. Eastern wisdom and life's spiritual cycles. Beyond Western philosophy, Eastern traditions offer rich frameworks for understanding life in stages. In Hinduism, the concept of the ashramas divides life into 4 stages: brahmacharya student, grihastha householder, vanaprastha forest dweller, and sannyasa renunciate. Around midlife, the transition from householder to forest dweller marks a shift from worldly duty to spiritual seeking. Similarly, in Buddhism, the story of Siddhartha Gautama the Buddha illustrates this midlife awakening. At the age of 29, relatively early by modern standards, he left behind his royal life after encountering suffering. His journey represents the turning away from superficial existence toward a deeper understanding of suffering, impermanence, and liberation. These traditions recognize that maturity brings not just aging, but awakening. The first half of life is devoted to building, the second half, to transcending. Jung's psychological individuation mirrors these spiritual journeys. At 40, one turns inward, relinquishing the ego's control and seeking union with a deeper self or ultimate reality. Thus, across cultures, the idea that life begins at midlife is not new. It is a perennial wisdom that recognizes the cyclical nature of growth, from doing to being, from striving to understanding, from separation to unity, from persona to presence. Carl Jung's statement that life really begins at 40 encapsulates a truth that transcends time and culture, that the deepest layers of selfhood often lie dormant until midlife. In youth, we construct ourselves from the outside in, shaped by family, society, and ambition. But in maturity, we begin to shape ourselves from the inside out. What once seemed stable, career, relationships, even identity, can feel insufficient. Yet this is not a sign of failure, but of awakening. Philosophers from Kierkegaard to Aristotle, sages from the Buddha to modern psychologists, affirm this arc of development, that life, the second half, holds a potential richer than its first. Not in terms of accomplishments, but in meaning. Individuation, authenticity, and flourishing are not destinations reached quickly, but lifelong journeys, often beginning only after the illusions of youth fade. To live fully is to engage both halves of life, to embrace the outward striving of youth, and then to release it in favor of inner truth. In this sense, Jung's quote is not only psychological advice, it is a call to wisdom. Life truly begins at 40, not because we become someone new, but because we finally begin to become ourselves.